Mathieu Dufresne from the startup 3DO. My question to Mr. Abdallah, you presented an example with a genetic analysis. I think it was the first example. You were talking about an impossible obstacle, and you said that it was a difference between upstream and downstream, and we had a mixed area between the two, so it is impossible on one side, and on the other side it's not the same. So is it a partial crossing? So can you explain a little bit more? Yes. Well, actually for this population, it had impulse communications with the isolated population upstream. So we had communication. It was called Méché 7, so the individuals were descending and they stayed on this station only. So we had no communication at all between the isolated population by individuals crossing this natural obstacle. So this population called Méché 6, I said that it was an intermediary population because it was the only one which had alleles from this isolated population upstream. And it was only due to these individuals descending the river, so no communication from the bottom to the top. We can imagine that there was no transfer from humans either. Well, the Fish Federation is in the room, so if they want to intervene, Rémi, maybe. We talked about that before. The history, the way that we manage the truth population, well, a lot of things were done with very few checks for a long time. For what I know, we don't know if at some point this population could receive input communications due to local manipulation. A perfect answer. Next question. I'd like to come back on the genetics. A question after the intervention of Simon Blanchet, and we didn't reply to that. I think that most of the participants know it. But you take the DNA sampling on living organisms. Yes, on the truth, we take a small part of its pelvian gene. So we make an anesthesis. We do that traditionally for classical biometry. So it is minimally invasive. Thanks for this clarification. So it is minimally invasive. So we have got a lot of feedback about that. So we have got a very good healing process. And for the sampling that we are taking, so the survival rate is very high, in the interest of your data as well. Next question. So either a mic. Yes. I've got a question for Giancarlo. May I speak in English? Because my French is a catastrophe.
By the way, my name is Gordon Grant. I'm from the U.S. Forest Service and also Oregon State University. I'm very impressed by what I'm hearing today as to the amount of work and the depth of work that is occurring in European rivers. We've heard many conceptual frameworks for thinking about how to remove barriers and to reconstruct, in a sense, free-flowing rivers. But I want to pick up on a point, Giancarlo, that you left us with at the end, which was, do we have mechanisms do we have frameworks that allow us to prioritize in any given basin what is the most effective sequence for restoration using these sorts of techniques, which would require some sort of integrated assessment in which the activities are placed within a broader context of thinking how the river works and what it needs. Is that, am I clear? Merci.
Thank you. The question is clear to me, and unfortunately, those two slides that I have given up were dealing right with this issue. I was supposed to present those two tools that we have developed in Italy. One dealing with the prioritization of whale removal or modification according to fish migration issues, and that is a prioritization index that takes into account the geometry, the dimension of the whale, but even the typology of the river and some target species you are going to address. So we have developed this index in Italy, but many other indexes that work like this have been developed in Europe, and so this is good news. And going to the sediment management, the second index that I was supposed to show was the connectivity index. That kind of index has been developed in Italy as well, but again, many others have been developed across Europe. And that index takes into account the capacity of a river to transport sediment downstream, according to the, to the land use, to the slope, to the several morphometric feature of the basin. So definitely the question is, yes, we have some tools, but the use of those tools is not so widespread. And I think is an issue of uncertainty first. So from the scientific point of view, they don't provide a solution that can be used so easily everywhere. So the framework is done, but then case by case, the framework cannot work so well. And this is the first issue. And the second issue is, in my view, a cultural issue. That is, where is the willingness to decide, take into account quantitative information? Where is this willingness? In Italy, it's not so common. And unfortunately, I think that even in other countries, it's not so common. I hope for the States to have this more development than we have.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci pour cette question et cette.
Thank you for your answer and for your question and detailed answer. So if you have got more questions, there is still a mic in the room. So we'll start with you, sir. Hi, Nicolas Maillon from Belgium. I work in the Natural Park of Haute-Luire, and I've worked on a project on 5 years about the truth for you, and I've got a question for Mr. Abdallah about the genetic manipulation. So naturally, it is very structured. In France, you are lucky because you have got an evolution of the species. It is massively done thanks to a species which was developed. I would like to know how you treat the conservation in the Mediterranean. I wanted to know if in your manipulations you were able to determine how these truths are preserved, and if there is a link with the Atlantic, or do you consider the obstacle? As you said, for us it is Arnaud Caudron who is working on that. It would be better to ask the question to him. For the liseron in the Mediterranean Sea, we didn't have such an issue because the repopulation is very old. So we didn't have this parameter to integrate. for the Méché, we wondered ourselves because we know that we still have practices which are not well managed. And we know that there are some interferences, but for these two study cases, we worked mainly on differentiation and influence of the barriers. For the differentiation, it is confirmed, yes, with other populations. The question is important, significant, because for the Mediterranean basin, it is an important point, and we have got many cases in which this notion of connection between population from the Mediterranean Sea, which are preserved, and other populations from the Atlantic Ocean should be taken into consideration in the intervention strategies. I had to give you an example of that, but I already talked too much. In Savoie, for example, we should have upstream of the Atlantic with a genetic diagnostic. We decided not to equip the weir downstreams, but upstreams. And progressively, we wanted to increase the extension of the Mediterranean population and to remove the Atlantic fish. We didn't decide for that yet, but if we only do reconnection and an extension of the territory, if we still have the Atlantic population upstream, we won't have efficient results. So these questions, well, they are part of our work. I repeat that we know that you had to reduce your presentation due to the data and information that you could have give to us. Do you have any other question? Not necessarily. Well, we give you the last word for this session if you want. Once again, in order to preserve the time that we have for the break, we'll ask you to introduce yourself. It will be the last question of this session. Still from the same organism, just to add some information. He couldn't put everything. This morning, we had a very good example of the population decline in the framework of the follow-up of the Liseron. So you explained the genetic diversity, which was increasing with connectivity of the population and removal of 20 barriers. We follow the genetics of the population and we can see an increase of the population, especially for the truth, which has a bigger presence in the basin. And we made censuses before the works, so it was very difficult for these catchment areas. And once again,
Et donc, ce que l'on a pu voir, c'est que
we have seen with this drought that the population was able to survive after being decompartmented. So we had big movements towards upstream. Thanks for your testimony, for this additional information.